probably one is a decision. The other is a book that I read. Let me start with the last one because that happens first. My first career was in academia. So I did my PhD. During my PhD, I read a book, quite a philosophical, sociological, heavy book by Hans Joas, The Creativity of Action. And that, I think, looking back, that's like 20 years ago, I think that profoundly changed the way I looked at people, at the world, especially human behavior. And I won't summarize the entire book here, but what stood out for me is the idea that human action, so what we do, does not necessarily start with an intention, with a goal. So the traditional way of thinking is always, okay, we first have something in our mind, in our brain, we set a goal, and then we execute. And what I learned from that book is that that's not even close to how human beings work. And our goals, our purposes, our intention, they evolve when we do stuff. And I could personally relate to this very much because I never had a clear idea about my career. I had no kind of long-term vision on what I would like to be, the kind of job or I had no idea. I just jumped from kind of gradually, organically from one position into the other. So that's also how I became a PhD student. There was never a plan, but it happened. I got into the circumstances. Then the idea emerged that, hey, that could be an interesting career. And actually it's something that I would go for. And then I spent 4 years on my PhD, finished it, got onto an academic career because that idea of the end in view. So once you are working on something, then the next step kind of emerges. And I found that that has really transformed, I think, the way I behave, the way I do things, the way I have my career. But also, if you look at the content of what I do, I'm a strategy expert. So I help individuals and organizations develop and execute strategy. And interestingly, strategy is also a field where the traditional view is that first you set your goals, you set your vision, your missions, your ambitions, like sitting in a room with a couple of people, you think, and you define those long-term objectives, visions, and so on, and then you execute. And through my education and reading this book by Hans Joas and a bunch of other books on American pragmatism, I realized that this is not how human behavior works. So it's not how strategy works. So it has been also, if you look into my books, the strategy handbook, strategy consulting, the 1 Hour Strategy, and also the strategic leadership playbook, you'll see underneath this is this kind of worldview where action does not always start with intention and goals. Those emerge as well. So we need a much more agile, iterative, contextual, situated approach to strategy and human behavior as well. I think looking back, that has been the first kind of major transformational moment for me to how I look at the world and how I look at people. The second one is more a decision or a career step. As I mentioned, my first career, I was in academia, did my PhD, became an assistant professor, became an associate professor. So I was fully on track to become a full professor, and I would have been one like years ago. And at some point in time, I thought, this is not my career. I always have kept a connection to academia. I wanted to have a more visible, direct impact on the real world. And the step I made, and I had the luxury of making it kind of step by step. I could reduce my contract at the university, like from 5 to 4 to 3 days. So I had a gradual change, but I decided I'm a strategy consultant. So kind of from one day on the other, I kind of went on the look for my first client, presenting myself as a strategy consultant. And I think that decision to leave academia has been one of the best decisions for me. I have nothing against working in academia, but it's just not the best fit for me because now I can have the impact. Now I can have the freedom to do what I like. I can still do some research. I can still learn. I can still read, develop my thinking, my thoughts, and I can write and publish in a way that I like. And if you look at the books, look at my Forbes articles, look at my LinkedIn posts, I found my own way of communicating my expertise with the world, and also my own way of doing pragmatic research, which would not qualify for, like, say, academic research, but nevertheless, it helps me develop and improve. And I could never have done that without that decision. And it's also an identity shift because I've always saw myself as an academic, as a researcher. And after kind of having spent 10 years in that field, suddenly identifying as a consultant, as a mentor, it really took some time for me to get used to the idea, and also for others to see me like that, because I suddenly was in a different role as before. Those are the two professional, personal moments, decisions that I can think of shaping me to what I am now. Mostly it is emotional. It's kind of a liberation. I think looking back before that kind of feeling, and I'm now referring to the book by Joas, The Creativity of Action. I always felt there's something wrong with how people talk about behavior and about strategy, like the idea of first thinking, deciding, and then doing. And it never matched the way I thought myself and the way I acted. So I think I've always been on the search for something that aligns better with how I think, how I am. So it was kind of a confirmation for me and also a liberation that, hey, this is a very respected professor writing about this, and it's actually based on a long tradition going back like 100 years from now, where many very respected researchers and academics have argued something that I felt intuitively. And I think that felt maybe in a very short phrase like, hey, I'm not crazy. I felt it the right way. And that has given me a lot of confidence also to rely on more on my intuition, which is what I do, I think, on a day-to-day basis. The decisions I make nowadays are much more based intuitively because I have this gut feel like this is the right way. They're more organic and less kind of thought up in my head. So that's really changed the way I think, changed the way I act, and also changed the way I work with my clients. Yeah, whether I transform the lives of other people, I don't know. That's up to them. And maybe transformation, it's a word easily used. I hope I have at least some impact for the good. And I know, especially in my education, that I do, because there I see how people develop what they learned and how they can apply what they learned while spending some time with me and going through my books and my courses and so on. But I think what I try to do, and maybe I try to transform myself continuously, learn, grow, improve, and thereby inspire others to do the same. Also give them the tools. I'm pretty much an open book. I share, of course, never everything, but like 80-90% of what I know, I try to share with the rest of the world, because I get better from that, because people see me as an expert. They come to me, they would like to have me as a consultant and a mentor, but they get better from that as well, because they have access to the things that I've learned. So I'm really trying to pass on the things that I've learned, organize them in a way that makes it more digestible, simpler, and then help others make the same transformation. So maybe you're right that in the long run, if you look at the bigger picture, like through what I'm doing, I'm changing the way people think, and that will change how they feel and how they act in their jobs, and maybe even in their private lives. At least if that happens, I'd be very happy, because that has been the reason I moved out of academia, because I wanted to have this more direct impact on people in the real world.